The blood on Frances Harper's hands had long since dried, but she still scrubbed them raw in the basin, watching the pink-tinged water swirl and disappear into the dirt below her porch. 3 months had passed since they buried Thomas. 3 months since the fever took him in the space of 4 agonizing days, and still she could not shake the feeling that she should have done more, been better, saved him somehow. It was April of 1876 in Sioux Falls, Dakota Territory, and the spring thaw had turned her small ranch into a quagmire of mud and melting snow. The cattle needed tending, the fences needed mending, the roof leaked in 2 places, and her 7-year-old son Daniel had outgrown his only pair of boots. Frances dried her hands on her apron and looked out across the land that stretched before her, 160 acres that had been their dream and was now her burden. She was 26 years old and felt ancient. The sun was barely breaking the horizon when she heard the horse approaching. Frances tensed, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle she now kept propped by the door. A woman alone was vulnerable in ways she had never fully understood when Thomas was alive. But the rider made no attempt at stealth, coming straight up the muddy track with an easy confidence that suggested he had every right to be there. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a brown duster that had seen better days and a hat pulled low against the morning sun. When he reached the yard, he dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who had spent more of his life on horseback than on foot. He was perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of summer sky. A dark beard covered his jaw, neatly trimmed, and when he removed his hat, his hair was the color of wheat just before harvest. "Morning, madam," he said, his voice deep and respectful. "Name's William Mercer. I worked some with your husband last fall, helping to move that herd down from Yankton. I was sorry to hear about his passing." Frances stiffened, wrapping her arms around herself. She remembered Thomas mentioning a cowboy named Will, someone reliable he had said, someone who knew cattle and kept his word. "Thank you," she said, her voice flat. "If you are looking for work, I cannot afford to hire anyone." "Wasn't asking for pay, madam." William turned his hat in his hands, a gesture that seemed more thoughtful than nervous. "I was passing through and thought I might check on those fence posts along your eastern boundary. Thomas mentioned they were getting weak. Winter like we just had, they probably need replacing before your cattle start wandering. I appreciate the thought, but I can manage my own property, Mr. Mercer." "Yes, madam, I expect you can." He settled his hat back on his head. "I will be in the area for a spell. If you change your mind, I am staying at the boarding house on Phillips Avenue." He mounted his horse and rode away without another word, leaving Frances standing on her porch feeling oddly off balance. She had expected argument or persistence, some attempt to convince her she needed a man's help. Instead, he had simply offered and accepted her refusal without injured pride or condescension. She told herself she was glad to see him go. Daniel came out as she was hauling water from the well, his 2 short trousers showing bony ankles that seemed to grow longer every day. "Who was that man, Mama?" "Someone who knew your father. No one important." But William Mercer appeared the next morning just as the sun broke over the eastern pasture. This time he did not approach the house. Instead, he rode directly to the sagging fence line and began working, replacing posts and restringing wire with practiced efficiency. Frances watched from the window as she kneaded bread dough, her hands working with angry force. She would not go out there. She would not acknowledge his presumption. He would grow tired and leave, except he did not leave. He worked through the morning, pausing only to water his horse from the creek that ran along the property line. At noon, he ate something from his saddlebag, rested for perhaps 20 minutes, and then returned to work. By the time Daniel came home from the small schoolhouse in town, a full section of fence stood straight and strong, the wire taut and properly secured. The next day, William appeared again, and the day after that. Frances tried to ignore him, tried to focus on her own endless list of tasks. The chickens needed feeding, the cow needed milking, the garden needed planting, and she had laundry to take in from Mrs. Peterson in town to earn extra money. Her days began before dawn and ended long after dark, and still there was never enough time, never enough hands, never enough of her to do what needed doing. On the fifth day, one of her cows got tangled in the old wire of a fence section William had not yet reached. Frances heard the bellowing and ran, grabbing wire cutters as she went, but the animal was panicked and thrashing, cutting itself worse with every movement. She was trying to calm it enough to work when William appeared beside her, seemingly from nowhere. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and soothing, directed at the cow. "Let me get in there. You keep her head steady." Frances wanted to argue, but the cow was bleeding and frightened, and she had no time for pride. She held the animal's head, speaking softly while William worked with steady hands to cut away the wire. When the cow was free, he examined the cuts carefully, his touch gentle despite his rough hands. "Nothing too deep," he said, "but they will need cleaning. You have any carbolic solution?" In the barn. They worked together in silence, William holding the cow while Frances cleaned and dressed the wounds. It was only when they finished that she realized how close they were standing, close enough that she could smell leather and clean sweat, close enough to see the flecks of green in his blue eyes. She stepped back abruptly. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "You are welcome, Mrs. Harper." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "That fence is dangerous. Let me finish replacing it before another animal gets hurt, or before Daniel comes running out here and catches his leg in it." The mention of her son made her chest tight. She had worried about that exact thing a dozen times, had lain awake at night cataloging all the dangers she could not protect him from alone. "I told you, I cannot pay you. I know what you told me." William walked to his horse and pulled a canteen from his saddle. But Thomas was a good man, and he would have done the same for anyone who needed help. "I am not asking for anything in return, Mrs. Harper. I am just doing what needs doing." Frances felt something crack inside her, some wall she had built between herself and the world. "Why?" The word came out harsh, almost angry. "Why do you keep coming here? What do you want from me?" William took a long drink from his canteen, his eyes never leaving hers. "I want you to stop trying to kill yourself, trying to do everything alone. I want Daniel to stop looking so worried all the time. I want those cattle fed and that roof patched before the next rain. And maybe, if you could spare it, I would not mind a cup of coffee that was not made in a tin can over a campfire." Despite herself, Frances felt her mouth twitch. It was not quite a smile, but it was the closest she had come in 3 months. "That fence will take at least another 2 days to finish. Probably 3 if I am being honest. Some of those posts are rotted clear through. Come to the house when you are done for the day. I will have coffee." It was a small concession, barely an acknowledgement of his help, but William's face lit up as if she had offered him something precious. "Yes, madam. I would like that very much." Frances walked back to the house, her heart beating strangely fast. She told herself it meant nothing, just common courtesy, but she found herself checking her reflection in the small mirror by the door and smoothing her hair back before she could stop herself. When William knocked that evening, she had coffee ready and some cornbread left from supper. Daniel watched him with wide, curious eyes as the cowboy folded his long frame into one of the kitchen chairs, handling the delicate cup with surprising care. "This is mighty fine coffee, madam," William said. "Best I have had in some time." "It is just coffee, Mr. Mercer." "Will, please." Mr. Mercer makes me sound like my father, and that is a man I have no desire to resemble. Frances poured herself a cup and sat across from him, aware of Daniel hovering nearby. "You are not from around here, then?" "Texas, originally. Left home when I was 16 and have been working cattle and ranches ever since. Been up to Montana, down to New Mexico, pretty much anywhere there was work and space to breathe." He took another sip of coffee. "Gets lonely sometimes, all that moving around, but it suited me well enough. Until recently." "What changed recently?" William's eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. "I realized I was tired of moving, tired of never having a place that was mine, never building anything that would last. Your husband talked a lot about this place, about putting down roots and building something for his family. It stuck with me, I guess. So you want land of your own. Someday, maybe. First, I need to save up enough to make that happen." He smiled at Daniel, who had edged closer. "You must be about 7, I would guess." 7.5, Daniel said solemnly. "I am almost as tall as Mama now. I can see that. You help your Mama with the ranch. I feed the chickens every morning and I help carry water. Mama says I am a good helper. I bet you are." William looked back at Frances. "You are raising a fine boy, Mrs. Harper." The simple compliment made her throat tight. Thomas had been so proud of Daniel, had such plans for teaching him to run the ranch. "He is a good son," she managed. After William left, Daniel peppered her with questions about the cowboy, about whether he would come back, about whether he could help with the fence tomorrow after school. Frances answered absently, her mind turning over the conversation, the easy way William had sat in her kitchen, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. She caught herself and pushed the thoughts away. It was too soon, too raw. Thomas had been dead only 3 months. Whatever William Mercer wanted, she had nothing to give him except coffee and common courtesy. But he came back the next day and the next, working his way systematically through her list of repairs. When the fence was finished, he started on the barn roof. When the barn was sound, he noticed the loose boards on the porch. Frances stopped protesting after the first week, though she could not bring herself to ask for help directly. Instead, she left a list on the kitchen table where he could see it when he came in for coffee, and the next day he would start on whatever task seemed most urgent. "You are going to work yourself into the ground," she told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. Daniel was playing near the barn, close enough to be safe but far enough to give them the illusion of privacy. "You cannot possibly be earning any money, spending all your time here." "I pick up work in town when I can," William said. "Helped move some freight for the general store, did some shoeing for the livery. I am not starving if that is what worries you. It is not my place to worry about you. Maybe not, but you do anyway." He said it matter-of-factly without presumption. "Just like I worry about you, working from before dawn until after dark, never taking a moment for yourself." Frances looked down at her hands, work-roughened and calloused. "There is too much to do to take moments for myself." "There will always be too much to do. That is the nature of ranching. But you will run yourself into an early grave if you do not ease up some." "I cannot afford to ease up. I have Daniel to think about, and the bank note comes due in September, and the cattle need to be in good condition for sale in the fall, or we will not make it through next winter." The words came tumbling out, all the fears she had been holding inside for months. "I am drowning, Mr. Mercer. Every day I am drowning a little more and I do not know how to stop it." William was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on her face. "Then let me help you learn to swim." "I cannot pay you." "I am not asking for pay. I am asking you to trust me enough to share the load." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Francis Harper, but strength does not mean doing everything alone. It means knowing when to accept help. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made something flutter in her chest. Why do you care so much? You barely knew Thomas. You do not know me at all. I know enough. William stood and walked to the porch rail, looking out at the land painted gold by the setting sun. I know you get up every morning even though grief is crushing you. I know you smile at your son even when I can see the exhaustion in your eyes. I know you have not bought yourself a single thing since I have been coming here, but Daniel has new boots and the school teacher got paid on time. I know you are trying to be two people, and it is killing you slowly. Frances felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. So you pity me? No. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. I admire you, but admiration does not mean I want to watch you work yourself to death. Then what do you want, Will? Really? He opened his mouth, closed it, seemed to struggle with something internal. I want to help you keep this ranch. I want to see you smile without sadness behind it. I want Daniel to be a boy instead of a little man carrying worries too heavy for his shoulders. And I want to have a reason to stay in one place for the first time in my life. I am not ready, Frances whispered. For whatever you are suggesting, I am not ready. I know. I am not asking you to be. William picked up his hat from the rail. I am just asking you to let me help. The rest, if there is a rest, can wait as long as it needs to. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. William arrived each morning just after dawn and worked until midday, then often rode into town for paid work, returning in the evening to do a few more hours before dark. Frances found herself watching for him, found herself listening for the sound of his horse, found her day felt incomplete when circumstances kept him away. They talked while they worked, tentative at first, then with growing ease. She learned that he had left Texas to escape a father who believed the only use for a son was as unpaid labor and a convenient target for frustration. He had taught himself to read from a Bible he had won in a card game, had worked as a drover on 3 long trail drives before deciding he preferred working with cattle on a ranch rather than moving them across the country. What about you? He asked one day as they planted the kitchen garden together. Were you born here in Dakota Territory, Missouri, originally? My father had a dry goods store in Independence. That is where I met Thomas. He came in to buy supplies for a trip west, and we started talking. She pressed seeds into the earth with careful precision. My father thought I was crazy to marry a man planning to homestead in Dakota Territory. Said I was throwing away a comfortable life for hardship and uncertainty. Were you? Yes. Frances sat back on her heels, looking at the neat rows they had planted. But I never regretted it. Thomas was a good man, a kind husband. We were happy here, or as happy as anyone can be when they are working hard to build something from nothing. You still love him. It was not a question, but Frances answered anyway. I will always love him. He gave me Daniel, gave me this place, gave me 6 years of partnership and companionship. But he is gone, and I am still here, and I do not know how to be the person I am now without him. William reached over and covered her hand with his, the touch warm and solid. You do not have to figure it out all at once. You just have to take it one day at a time. She did not pull away from his touch, and they stayed like that for a long moment before Daniel came running up with news of a bird's nest he had found, breaking the spell. In May, trouble came in the form of Silas Yates, a rancher from the neighboring property who had made offers to buy the Harper land twice while Thomas was alive. He rode up to the house on a Saturday morning when William was in town, his face flushed with drink, though it was barely past breakfast. Mrs. Harper, he said, not bothering to dismount. "I hear you are struggling to keep this place running. I am prepared to make you a fair offer, enough to set yourself up in town comfortably. You could open a seamstress shop, something suitable for a woman alone." Frances stood on her porch, the rifle near enough to reach if needed. "I am not interested in selling, Mr. Yates. I told you that when my husband was alive, and my answer has not changed. Now, be reasonable. A woman cannot run a ranch alone. You will work yourself into the ground and lose it to the bank anyway. At least this way you would walk away with something." I said no. Yates's expression hardened. "That cowboy who has been hanging around, he putting ideas in your head. Everyone in town is talking about it, you know. A widow letting some drifter spend time on her property, coming and going as he pleases. People are starting to wonder about your moral character, Mrs. Harper." Rage flooded through Frances, hot and cleansing. "Get off my land, Mr. Yates, now. I am trying to help you, you foolish woman. When you lose this place, do not come crying to me." He wheeled his horse around and galloped off, leaving Frances shaking with fury and, beneath the fury, fear. She had not thought about how her arrangement with William might look to others, had not considered that people might talk. In a small town like Sioux Falls, reputation mattered, and a woman's reputation was fragile as spun glass. When William returned that evening, she told him what had happened. His jaw tightened as she spoke, his hands curling into fists. "Yates is a bully and a drunk," he said. "No one with sense pays attention to his talk. But people are talking, Will. He was right about that. And I cannot afford to have people question my character, not when I am trying to hold onto this ranch and raise a son. Then maybe we should give them something real to talk about." Frances stared at him. "What are you suggesting?" William took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee in front of her, taking her hand in both of his. "Marry me, Frances, not because of gossip or reputation, but because I have come to care for you and Daniel more than I thought possible. Because I want to help you build this ranch into something lasting. Because I wake up every morning excited to see you, and I go to sleep every night thinking about you, and I cannot imagine going back to drifting from place to place when everything I want is right here. Will, I..." Frances felt panic rising in her chest. "It has only been 4 months since Thomas died. People will think I am dishonoring his memory. People will think what they want regardless of what you do. The question is, what do you want, Frances? Not what is proper or expected, but what does your heart want?" She looked down at him. This man who had appeared in her life with such unexpected persistence, who had worked without pay or promise, who had been patient with her grief and gentle with her son. She thought about the way her days felt brighter when he was near, the way her burdens felt lighter when shared with him, the way his smile made her heart beat faster. "I want to stop being so tired," she whispered. "I want to sleep through the night without worrying about everything that could go wrong. I want Daniel to laugh more. I want to feel like I am living instead of just surviving. Then marry me. Let me share the work and the worry. Let me give Daniel a father who will love him and teach him. Let me give you a partner again." His blue eyes were steady on hers, full of hope and sincerity. "I know I am not Thomas, and I am not trying to replace him, but I can be Will, and I can promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy." Frances felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "What if I cannot love you the way you deserve? What if my heart is too broken? Hearts mend, Frances, and I am patient. I will take whatever you can give me and count myself lucky to have it." He squeezed her hand gently. "But you need to know I already love you. I have loved you since the day you stood on this porch and told me you could manage your own property, all fierce independence and quiet strength. I will love you tomorrow and next month and next year. That is not going to change regardless of your answer." She thought about propriety and mourning periods and what people would say. Then she thought about waking up every morning alone, about Daniel growing up without a father, about losing the ranch because she could not do everything by herself. She thought about William's steady presence, his patient kindness, the way he made her feel safe and seen and valued. "Ask me again in 3 months," she heard herself say. "Give me until August to make peace with this, to be sure. If you still want me then, I will say yes." William's face split into a grin that transformed him from handsome to beautiful. "I will still want you in August, Frances Harper. I will want you in August and October and next April and every day after that." He stood and pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since Thomas died, Frances let herself lean on someone else's strength. She rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart and felt something inside her begin to unfreeze. The news of their engagement, conditional though it was, spread through Sioux Falls faster than fire through dry grass. The reaction was mixed. Some of the church ladies clucked disapprovingly about unseemly haste and proper mourning. Others, particularly the women who knew the realities of running a household alone, nodded approvingly and wished Frances well. Silas Yates made a few dark mutterings about opportunistic cowboys, but after William had a quiet word with him outside the saloon, he kept his opinions largely to himself. For Frances, the 3 months between May and August passed in a blur of hard work and gradual healing. William moved into the small bunkhouse behind the barn, insisting on propriety until the wedding. He worked the ranch as if it were already his, rising before dawn to tend the cattle, repairing equipment, planning for the fall sale. In the evenings, he taught Daniel to rope and ride, patient with the boy's mistakes and generous with his praise. Frances watched them together one evening in June, saw Daniel's face bright with concentration as William showed him how to properly coil a lasso, and felt her heart expand with an emotion she had thought was buried with Thomas. Not the same love she had felt for her first husband, but something new and equally precious. William caught her watching and she smiled back without reservation. They talked late into the nights, sitting on the porch after Daniel was asleep, sharing their histories and hopes. William told her about the loneliness of drifting, about sleeping under stars in a dozen different states, about the deep hunger for home that he had never been able to name until he met her. Frances told him about the early days of her marriage, about watching Thomas build this ranch from raw prairie, about the terror and joy of Daniel's birth in a Dakota blizzard with only Thomas and a neighbor woman to help. "You want more children?" William asked one night in late July, the air heavy with summer heat and the sound of crickets. Frances was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I do," she said finally. "I always wanted Daniel to have siblings, but I am afraid." The birth was hard, and out here, so far from a doctor, anything could happen. "We will make sure you have the best care we can get," William said firmly, "and I will be there with you every step of the way. You will not be alone. You cannot promise that." "No, but I can promise I will do everything in my power to make it true." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I know life does not come with guarantees, Frances, but I want to build a life with you anyway, with all the risks and uncertainties that come with it." She lifted his hand to her lips and kissed his knuckles, a gesture that made his breath catch. August cannot come soon enough. They were married on the 15th of August in the small church on Main Street, with half the town in attendance. Frances wore a simple blue dress that brought out the amber in her brown eyes, her dark hair pinned up and decorated with wildflowers that Daniel had picked that morning. William wore his best shirt and a vest borrowed from the boarding house owner, his hair slicked back and his beard neatly trimmed. Daniel stood beside them, solemn and proud in his role as witness, and when the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, his young voice rang out clear. I do not object. Will is going to be the best pa a boy could have." The congregation laughed, warm and approving, and even the minister smiled before continuing with the ceremony. When William kissed his bride, it was gentle and sweet, a promise rather than a demand, and Frances felt something click into place inside her, a sense of rightness that she had not expected to feel again. The reception was held at the ranch, neighbors bringing food and drink, someone producing a fiddle for dancing. Frances danced with her new husband while the sun set over the prairie, his arms strong around her, his eyes full of love and wonder. "Are you happy?" he asked, his lips close to her ear. "I am," she said, and realized it was true. Not the same happiness she had known before, perhaps, but something new and bright and filled with hope. "I am happy, Will." Their wedding night was tender and uncertain, two people learning each other's bodies and boundaries. William was patient, taking his time, making sure Frances felt safe and cherished. When she cried after, he held her close and stroked her hair, understanding without words that the tears were not sadness but release, the final letting go of grief that had held her captive. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, the first time she had said the words to him. She felt him smile against her hair. "I love you too, Frances Mercer. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." The fall was busy with preparing for the cattle sale, sorting and branding, negotiating with buyers who came through Sioux Falls looking for stock. William proved to have a sharp head for business, getting prices that Frances had not thought possible. When the sale was complete, they had enough not only to pay the bank note but to put money aside for the winter and buy the breeding stock they needed to expand the herd. "We are going to make this work," William said, counting the money for the third time as if he could not quite believe it. "This ranch is going to thrive, Frances. I can feel it." And it did thrive, through that winter and into the next spring. William's presence changed everything. The work that had seemed insurmountable for one person was manageable for two. The long, lonely evenings were filled with conversation and companionship. Daniel blossomed under his stepfather's attention, growing confident and capable. In March of 1877, Frances realized she was pregnant. She told William over breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went absolutely still for a moment, then swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Careful," she protested, but she was laughing too. "You will make me dizzy." "We are having a baby," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "We are having a baby, Frances. Are you pleased? Pleased? I am over the moon. I am walking on clouds. I am the happiest man in Dakota Territory." He kissed her soundly, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your pa speaking, and I want you to know you are already loved beyond measure." Daniel was equally excited when they told him, immediately declaring that he wanted a brother who he could teach to rope and ride. "A sister would be all right too, I guess," he added magnanimously. Mama could teach her to cook and sew. The pregnancy was easier than Frances's first, perhaps because she was not trying to do everything herself. William insisted she rest more, took over the heavier chores, and fussed over her with such genuine concern that she could not find it in herself to be annoyed. They made arrangements for her to stay with a woman in town as her due date approached, someone who had experience with birthing and could get the doctor quickly if needed. In October, Frances gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Samuel, after William's grandfather. The labor was long but uncomplicated, and when William was finally allowed in to see his wife and son, he wept openly at the sight of them. "He is perfect," he said, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "You are perfect. Thank you, Frances. Thank you for this gift." "It took both of us," she said, exhausted but happy. "He is our gift, Will." They brought Samuel home to the ranch 2 weeks later, and Daniel appointed himself the baby's protector, always watching to make sure his little brother was safe and warm. William built a cradle that rocked gently, carved with careful detail, and Francis would often find him standing over it at night, just watching his son sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. Life settled into a new rhythm, busy but fulfilling. The ranch continued to grow, and by 1878 they were able to hire a young man to help with the heavy work, giving William time to focus on breeding better stock and planning for the future. Daniel started showing a real talent for working with horses, gentle and patient in a way that reminded Francis of William. Samuel was a sunny, cheerful baby who rarely cried and seemed to find joy in everything. On their second anniversary, William surprised Francis with a gift, a beautiful mare with a sweet temperament and smooth gaits. "I know you have not had much time for riding these past years," he said, "but I thought maybe you would like to have a horse that is just yours, for when you get the chance." Francis ran her hand along the mare's neck, feeling the sleek muscles beneath the glossy coat. "She is beautiful." "What is her name?" "That is for you to decide. She is yours." "Patience," Francis said after a moment. "I will call her Patience because that is what you showed me when I needed it most." William pulled her close, the mare standing placidly beside them. "You were worth waiting for." "You will always be worth waiting for." In the spring of 1879, Francis discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only joy and anticipation. Daniel, now 10, was old enough to be genuinely helpful, and Samuel was an easy toddler, content to play quietly while his mother worked. Their daughter was born in November, an easy birth that left Francis tired but elated. They named her Rose, for the wild roses that bloomed on the prairie every June. William was besotted immediately, this tiny girl who had her mother's brown eyes and dark hair. "I am outnumbered now," he said, holding Rose while Francis rested. 3 against 1. 4 against 1, Daniel corrected from where he sat on the bed beside his mother. "I am on Mama's side." "Traitor," William said with mock severity, then grinned. "But I suppose I can accept those odds." The years that followed were the happiest of Francis's life. The grief she had carried for so long did not disappear entirely, but it transformed, becoming a gentle remembrance rather than a crushing weight. She told her children about Thomas, wanted them to know about the man who had started building this ranch, whose dreams had laid the foundation for their life. William listened to these stories without jealousy, understanding that Francis's past was part of what made her who she was. He added his own dreams to Thomas's foundation, expanding the ranch, building a larger house when the original cabin grew too small, planting trees that would provide shade for grandchildren not yet born. Daniel grew into a fine young man, skilled with horses and cattle, with his mother's steady determination and William's easy way with people. He started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher when he was 19. A sensible girl named Mary who could ride like the wind and was not afraid of hard work. Samuel, serious and thoughtful, showed an early aptitude for numbers and business. William talked about sending him to school back east when he was older, giving him opportunities to learn things that could help the ranch thrive. Rose was the baby, spirited and fearless, following her brothers everywhere and insisting she could do anything they could do. William indulged her shamelessly, teaching her to rope and shoot and ride, while Francis made sure she also learned reading and writing and the skills she would need to run a household. On a summer evening in 1886, Francis and William sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over land they had built together. Daniel was in town courting Mary, Samuel was doing his lessons inside, and Rose was supposedly asleep but more likely reading under her covers by candlelight. "Do you ever think about how things might have been different?" William asked. "If I had not shown up that day, if you had sent me away and made it stick." Francis took his hand, still calloused from work but familiar and dear. "Sometimes, but only to be grateful that it did not turn out that way. You saved me, Will. You and your stubborn persistence and your patient heart. You saved me from drowning in grief and work, and you gave me a life I could not have imagined." "You saved me too," he said. "I was lost before I found you, drifting without purpose or direction. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stay in one place and build something lasting. We saved each other then. I suppose we did." William brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "And I would do it all again, every single day, just to end up here with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, the sounds of the prairie settling around them. From inside the house came the murmur of Samuel's voice as he read aloud to himself, and in the distance, the lowing of cattle moving through the pasture. It was the sound of home, of family, of a life built through hard work and patience and love. Frances leaned her head on William's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. She thought about the woman she had been 10 years ago, drowning in grief and desperate to keep her head above water. That woman would hardly recognize her life now, would be amazed at the happiness and peace she had found. "I love you," she said, simple words that carried the weight of a decade of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. "I love you too," William replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Today and tomorrow and always." The years continued to unfold, bringing their share of challenges and changes. There were hard winters and drought years, times when money was tight and worry kept them awake at night. But they faced it all together, William and Frances, partners in every sense of the word. Daniel married his Mary in the spring of 1887, and they settled on a piece of land adjoining the ranch, building their own home and starting their own herd. Their first child, a boy they named Thomas after Frances's first husband, was born in 1888, and Frances wept happy tears when she held her grandson for the first time. "Thomas would be so proud," William said, his arm around his wife as they watched Daniel with his new son. "Of you, of Daniel, of everything we have built here." "I think he would be," Frances agreed. "And I think he would be grateful to you for taking care of us when he could not." Samuel went east to school as planned, returning with new ideas about cattle breeding and ranch management that helped them expand and modernize. He married a teacher he met in Philadelphia, a gentle woman named Clara who adapted to ranch life with determination and grace. Rose proved as stubborn about her independence as her mother had once been, refusing several marriage proposals before finally accepting the suit of a young lawyer in Sioux Falls. She and her husband built a house in town, but Rose rode out to the ranch several times a week, unable to stay away from the land she loved. Frances and William grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming more gnarled with arthritis, but their love only deepening with time. They were grandparents many times over, the ranch house often filled with the laughter and chaos of visiting grandchildren. On their 20th anniversary in 1896, their children threw them a party, gathering friends and neighbors from across the territory, now the state of South Dakota. There were speeches and toasts, dancing and feasting, and through it all, William kept Frances's hand in his, their fingers intertwined. 20 years, he said as they danced slowly while the party continued around them. Best 20 years of my life. Mine too, Frances said. Even the hard parts because we went through them together. Here is to 20 more, William said, and kissed her while their children and grandchildren cheered. They got those 20 years and more. They saw the new century arrive, saw automobiles appear on the streets of Sioux Falls, saw the world change in ways they could never have imagined. But through it all, the ranch remained, a testament to their partnership and love, a legacy for the generations that would come after them. Frances was 68 when William fell ill in the winter of 1918. It was pneumonia, the doctor said, and at 72, William's body did not have the strength to fight it off. He died peacefully in their bed, with Frances holding his hand and their children gathered around. At his funeral, Frances stood dry-eyed and straight-backed, the same fierce strength that had caught William's eye so many decades ago still evident in every line of her body. She had lost 2 husbands now, had buried 2 good men, but she was not drowning this time. William had taught her to swim, had given her the tools and strength to face grief without being consumed by it. She lived another 8 years, watching her grandchildren grow and have children of their own, tending the ranch that had been built by 3 people's dreams and 2 people's partnership. She died quietly in her sleep in the summer of 1926, surrounded by family with a smile on her face. They buried her next to William, on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the land they had worked and loved. The stone bore a simple inscription: Frances Harper Mercer, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. Below it, someone had added, she learned to swim. The ranch continued through the generations, each one adding their own dreams and work to the foundation. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the light slanted gold across the prairie, people swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old house, hand in hand, watching the sunset together as they had for so many years. It was a good life, built from grief and hard work, patience and love. It was not the life Frances had planned when she first came to Dakota Territory as a young bride, but it was the life she had earned, the happiness she had fought for and won. And in the end, that made all the difference. The story of the widow who was drowning and the cowboy who showed up daily, until she finally let him help, became a family legend, passed down through generations. It was told to great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, a reminder that love could come more than once, that grief could transform into joy, that persistence and patience could win the day. And every time it was told, the teller would end the same way, with a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help, that sometimes strength means knowing when to share the burden, and that sometimes the person who shows up day after day, asking for nothing, is offering everything. Frances and William's love story was not one of instant passion or dramatic gestures. It was built slowly, day by day, fence post by fence post, cup of coffee by cup of coffee. It was a love story written in repaired roofs and planted gardens, in shared work and quiet evenings, in the steady accumulation of moments that became a lifetime. It was a love story that proved second chances were real, that hearts could mend and grow and love again. It was a testament to the power of patience, the importance of showing up, and the transformative nature of true partnership. And perhaps most importantly, it was a reminder that love was not always about sweeping someone off their feet. Sometimes it was about helping them find their footing. Sometimes it was about standing beside someone while they learned to stand on their own again. Sometimes it was about being willing to wait, to work, to prove through actions rather than words that you were there for the long haul. That was the legacy Frances and William left behind, not just in the thriving ranch or their many descendants, but in the example of their love. An example that would inspire and guide their family for generations to come. A reminder that the best love stories were not always the easiest, but they were always worth fighting for. And so the story ended not with grief or loss, but with legacy and continuation, with the knowledge that what Francis and William had built together would endure long after they were gone, woven into the fabric of the land they had loved and the family they had raised, a permanent testament to the power of love, patience, and never giving up on someone who needed help, even when they were too proud or too hurt to ask for it.